I'm here with Pastor Brett Fuller. I assume most guys watching this probably know who you are, but for those who don't, you are the senior pastor of Grace Covenant in Chantilly, chaplain of the Washington football team. And how long have you been married?
I've got a great wife. After 33 years, 34 and 2 weeks, she still loves me. And she knows me better than anybody else, and she loves me. That's a blessing.
30?
Been married 33 years, be 34 in 3 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now you have grandkids as well.
Got a beautiful granddaughter who will be 1 in 2 days. Boy, she's fun and a handful.
So between that, 7 kids,
Yeah.
2, kids-in-law,
Yeah.
you got a lot going on. But thank you for making some time with us.
No, sure enough, glad to be here.
So before you were Pastor Brett, you were just Brett Fuller, growing up in Kansas City. What were you devoted to? What were the things that you were passionate about?
Yeah, as a kid, all I wanted to do was make it to the NFL. That's all I wanted to do. It didn't take long for me to realize I didn't have enough of anything to do that. I wasn't big enough, fast enough, strong enough, quick enough. There's nothing enough I had.
You're not
So
6'5".
No, not
Yeah.
6'5". I'm 5'8 3/4", and when I went to college, I was 160 pounds, and I ran about a 4.8, which is really slow. And there's nothing that would commend me to be to go any further than what I was, which was a NAIA football player at a very small school in middle Kansas. Enjoyed that. But then I pivoted, realizing there's no way I'm going to make that, and so I wanted to become a veterinarian. I really cared about animals. And I came back and did a summer internship for a week with a vet in my neighborhood, and quickly decided that was not for me. I had this fantasy idea that animals really loved vets because all they did was take care of them. They hated vets because it represented pain for them and being in a cage and fear. And so when animals go into a vet's office, they are not happy, and they bite the vet and they scratch the vet. And I thought, not for me. So then I said, I'm going to do what my dad did, which was become a dentist, and headed toward that. Accepted to dentistry school at Meharry Medical College in Nashville, Tennessee. And then God called me. I wound up going to ministry. So that's how I wound up here.
Yeah. So for most men, there's this drive, whether it's to make 7 figures or to have that corner office, or like you said, playing professional sports. What is that drive? Why do we all have that as men?
I think part of it is that we want to reaffirm our purpose for breathing, and that there's got to be some reason for us to be on the planet than just to take up space. And so, because Adam was created really close to his occupation, meaning when God created Adam, the very next thing God said is, let's put you in the garden and work. It's hard for us to separate those two. Many times we find our identity from our deeds. And when our deeds aren't done well, we feel like we're a failure. And that's a bad thing for a man to feel. Anybody to feel, but especially a man. A woman gets fired from a job, tough, really hard. But when a man gets fired from a job, he feels like, I'm worthless. There's no point in living anymore. Why in the world am I still here? Depression sets in, despondency. Why? Because we take so much of our identity from what we do. So when we talk about a man's drive, it is to prove that he is worth being on the planet, much of it. But a consecrated man's drive is to say, Lord, I want to please you. There's nothing I can do to prove that I'm worthy of being on the planet. You created me. That gives me intrinsic value. Therefore, my job is to not justify my being by what I do. My job is to please you by what I do. And that's the way we ought to be driven, is to make God happy, rather than to justify our existence.
Yeah, that's really good. Now, you were generous enough to write the foreword to my book, which I really appreciate.
Yeah.
And you wrote something that I wanted to allow you to elaborate on. You said, accomplishment is ill-designed to replace fulfillment, and success will never fit in the slot of purpose. So why don't accomplishments fill us as men?
Because we are called to be and do much more than whatever the next challenge is. Ultimately, men are called to be in the image of God. We're called, that's the way we're made, to be in the image of God. We have fallen from that image, and we are trying to claw our way back. We don't know it, most of us. We feel like that the next thing is simply to make us feel better about ourselves. But the ultimate reason we are pushing and driving is to reaffirm that which God put on the inside of us. And it's hidden to most people, but to those who get the revelation of it, it's a joy, because you realize, wow, I've got help to make that happen. There's no way I can do it on my own. And so we are satisfied with accomplishment, thinking that's going to stroke my ego enough to make me feel good about myself today, which can be a sense of replacement, but it's a very poor substitute for ultimate purpose. Because your ultimate purpose is just not to earn six figures. It's not to have a corner office. And there are a lot of people who get to the place of success and wind up being failures because they did not accomplish that for which God put them on the planet. And that's what we ought to pursue. Why in the world am I here? Not just what am I supposed to do today to make myself feel better about myself. Now, on the way to fulfillment, it's nice to have accomplishments. I mean, I want to be able to do well. I've got to make sure that I justify my employment. People hired me to perform well. So I've got to make sure that my sermon last week, even though I feel like I want to fire myself sometimes on Monday after a bad Sunday sermon, I have to say, okay, I've got to do better next week. I can't just earn a living by underperforming. At the same time, I take no value from what I do that somehow replaces who I'm supposed to be or the ultimate purpose for which I've been placed on the planet, which is much bigger than just a Sunday morning. And even when I am successful at my job in whatever task I must do, it doesn't replace my ultimate purpose. It's just an on-the-way thing. So I look at it as one rung that I've reached, that I don't have to reach anymore, upwards in fulfilling the purpose for which I've been placed on the planet anytime I'm successful. And when I'm unsuccessful, I still use that as a moment of teaching to say, okay, that doesn't torpedo me. That doesn't undermine my progress. That can be a stepping stone. I learned from that, so I don't do it again, and I wind up in a better spot next time when that challenge comes.
So for most men, when they think about being devoted to God, maybe they have a picture of like a monk, or for someone like you or myself who's in ministry, maybe that's their idea. Well, if I had, my whole life to devote to occupational ministry, then I would be devoted. But what do you think devotion to God looks like for like just a common everyday man?
Devotion to God means that you are committed to His purposes for your life. It doesn't mean you've got to do what I do in order to be most pleasing to Him. Now, when we talk about His purposes, I think ministry is on the inside of every person. But it doesn't mean they have to throw away their occupation and get another one in order to do that. So all of us are called to be something of God to somebody else, and that's ministry. Serve them with things that we have they don't. Supply their needs. Give them wisdom and understanding about how to be a good dad, a husband, a great friend. When they have no clue about what that means, the Bible gives us really good instruction about how to do all of that stuff. And if we've got the information, we need to share it. That by default makes us ministers, even though you're not paid to do so. So involved in the purpose of God will always be ministry. But that's not all it is. So for most people who are not employed in ministry, their ministry to God outside of just ministering the word is to be faithful to their employer, to do their job well, to provide for their family, to be a good citizen in the community, to make sure that they are a good church member, to love people regardless of their lovability. These are things that we are all called to do as human beings and Christians. If we do that, then we are fulfilling our purpose, even when you are employed in ministry.
So for you, even as a pastor, you don't spend the majority of your time with just Christians. You're always trying to figure out how to impact people, like for instance at the Washington football team, or
Sure.
someone comes to work on your house. So let's say when you do see someone come to know Christ, what are like the first steps that you would point them to if they wanted to devote themselves to God?
So if I see somebody come to know Jesus, I do want them to be involved in the church because they need a support network of people who are like-minded and can help them in their walk. But I do not want them to extricate themselves from the world in order to do so. So it's a both and. I need them to be involved with their friends so their friends can understand who Jesus is through their life. I enjoy church folk, love church folk. My whole life is caring for sheep. Don't want it to be any other way. But I really enjoy being around people who aren't church folk too, because those are the folks for whom Jesus died. And so I want to show them the love of Christ on a regular basis. I don't think I have to sacrifice one to get the other, although there may be times when the one leaves and Jesus says, the good shepherd went out after the one and left the 99. But it doesn't mean he neglected the 99. The 99 were still cared for by other shepherds. He just cared about that one that was gone. It's important for me to go out and find the one. And sometimes there are 10 ones that I'm finding at the same time. And I want to make sure that my life is just as involved in reaching people who need to know their purpose and don't know it, need to know who Jesus is and don't know him. I want to give myself to that as much as I do to the church. It may mean that the church doesn't see me as much. That's okay. I provided other shepherds whereby they can get what they need.
So when it comes to your devotion to God, how does that impact the other relationships that are important to you? Your wife, your kids, friends, coworkers.
And when it comes to my devotion to God, if my witness, if my life doesn't make Christian sense outside of my employment, then I probably need to find another job. That may not be true for any other employment, but for me, it is true in Christianity. It is true in pastoral ministry. Why? Because I base my ministry on the legitimacy of how I live in my house. If I can't be a great dad to my kids, I'm going to be lacking as a pastor. If I can't love my wife the way I should, I can't love the church the way I should. Now, if you ask them, they'll probably say, you haven't. But perfection is not the issue. Consistency is. And from what I grew up in, my parents were wonderful. Loved them. Amazing human beings. But from what I grew up in, I've raised the bar. There's no question. And that's only by the grace of God. It's not because I'm so skilled. But the bar and the expectation about what needs to be done in my home is significantly raised so that my children have a different inheritance than I grew up with. And so they have a different expectation than what was in my house, that what ought to be in their house. And so my Christianity is based on my everyday living. So I'll say it differently. My pastoral ministry in Christianity is based on my everyday living. And if I can't live well, I can't be who I need to be to the community, because then everything I do here as a job is just that. It's my occupation. And I don't want it ever to be that.
Well, you mentioned consistency, and I've had the privilege of serving under your leadership for, I guess, 8 years officially, but even before that, just as a volunteer. One of the things I most admire about you is just that consistency. Reading the Bible every day. Read your Bible. You say that in your sermons. But it's more than just a mantra for you. You live that out.
Yeah.
So for a man watching this interview and they recognize that, like many of us, maybe that consistency is lacking. How do you develop that consistency when it comes to devotion to God?
I wondered that when I was young too, and I read a bunch of books.
Okay.
The Joy of Discipline, The Practice of Discipline, and these books gave me little things that I could do that might help me on the road to good consistency. And one is, if you practice something 21 days in a row, it's going to become a habit. You won't have to do it anymore in terms of work hard. It'll just be reflexive, knee-jerk. You'll just be able to do it. And so I did it 21 days in a row. And on the 22nd day, I didn't do it. It just didn't work for me like that. And so I resigned to understand this. I've got to make a decision every day if I'm going to do the right thing. And although some things very well might become habitual, Christianity is not one of those things. I found that Christianity really is a discipline that if you're going to work it, it's more than just being satisfied with what Jesus has done for you. You got to be pressing to do what you need to do for him. And it's much like a husband who has to figure out how to love his wife. It is a lifelong journey. Not that we don't have affection. My wife is so wonderful. It's impossible for me not to be affectionate to her. I have to restrain myself. She's so great. But I have to learn to love her like she wants to be loved. And that doesn't ever stop because people change and she changes and I change. And we have to figure out what it looks like this year rather than last year. And I got her a gift this year that she thought should have been given 5 years ago. And so I have to always morph myself to be what she needs to be because love can never be pulled off the rack. It's got to be tailor-made. In the same way, our love for God is constantly being morphed, not because he changes, but because we need to change in order to comply. And so I find myself at a different point of stepping in a river, if you will, every day, even though it seems like the same river. And I say, Lord, I got to love you today. And I got to do this again tomorrow. And the discipline never stops. But because I get so much more out of my time with him than I put in, the discipline really does become a joy. But it's not habitual. It's not just rote. It is I make a choice every day. I'm going to read my Bible. I'm going to pray. Even though I'm tired, I love my God like this.
So when you find yourself in like maybe a rut where there's a dry season of your life when it comes to relationship with God, are there certain things that you do that you know to do to get yourself out of that rut?
When I find myself in a place where I can't find God the usual way, I can't get refreshed as I normally have been, I fast and pray. So to me, that's like digging a new well. So if it's dry, I'm going to find out where in the world the new water is. Fasting and praying places me in a spot, my own soul, whereby I'm not saying, God, I need you more than my necessary food. I cannot exist as well as I need to unless I get more of you now. There are more challenges I face today. There are more difficulties, more things are coming at me in bunches than they ever have. And I'm not as equipped as I need to be to handle them. So I need to grow up in a hurry. I need to get to where I need to be faster. And fasting is a catalyst for that because it number one, helps you understand who you are not and that you realize your own weakness. Number two, you get in the presence of God. He strengthens you in that weakness and then begins to supply in the areas of your lack. Number three, you recognize what life looks like in his presence rather than just you facing it on your own. And that when you pray and fast, not just fast, but pray, you're in his presence and you begin to see things from his perspective. And so the anxiety that normally might build in your soul regarding how difficult the situation is begins to subside and peace settles in, even though your circumstances haven't changed. And so fasting is not a cure-all. It's not the thing that I employ to say, oh, this is my go-to fix. Jesus is my go-to fix. But this is always a catalyst for me to get to him.
That's amazing. Well, Pastor Brett, I can't think of a better person to talk on this topic than you. So thank you for your devotion to God and just being an example to me and so many men that are watching this.
You're welcome. Glad to be able to serve. You're doing a great job.
Nobody on the planet is more blessed than me. Nobody, but it has nothing to do with how much or how little I have materially. It has everything to do with my relationship with God Almighty. So whether I'm doing well or whether I'm doing bad, I'm still blessed. Whether I'm worn out because the world has just beat the heck out of me, whether it be through persecution, whether it be through insults, whether it be through just trying to push things and feeling to push back, whatever it might be, just worn out, I'm blessed. Because blessed are you who are poor in spirit, for yours is the kingdom of God.